Have you ever wondered what happens when a millionaire who has everything money can buy faces a problem that money can't solve? This is the true story of a man whose world came to a halt when his daughter fell into a coma. After every expert and every fortune spent, failed hope seemed lost. But then, an unexpected hero emerged from the shadows, a homeless black boy with a shocking claim that he alone could wake her up. This is the journey of an unbelievable promise that challenges the very meaning of wealth, power, and faith. Life, they say, has a way of throwing wrenches into the most meticulously laid plans. For David Brooks, a man whose hands had built bridges, poured foundations, and lifted steel beams higher than most dreams, his greatest construction was his daughter Lena. At 10 years old, Lena was pure sunshine, a vibrant splash of color in a world that often felt rendered in shades of gray. She loved to laugh, a sound that could chase away any shadow, and her eyes held a spark of curiosity that promised a future as bright as any star. David, a foreman with calloused hands and a gentle heart, had poured every ounce of his being into raising her. He was building her a life brick by painstaking brick filled with warmth, stability, and boundless love. Then, one ordinary Tuesday morning, the blueprint of that life shattered. One moment, Lena was giggling over her breakfast cereal. The next, she collapsed, her small frame crumbling like a discarded drawing. The ER was a blur of frantic activity, the sterile white walls and the incessant beeping of machines replacing the comforting sounds of their home. Doctors, their faces grim, spoke in hushed tones about an acute neurological shutdown. Something so rare, so baffling, even the most esteemed pediatric neurologists from across the nation could only offer guesses. She might wake up, one had said. She might not. Another added almost in the same breath. For 7 agonizing days, Lena lay in a coma, a fragile doll beneath a pink blanket covered in cartoon stars, tubes wrapped around her like vines, clinging to a fading hope. The room smelled not of sunshine and cereal, but of antiseptic and sterile plastic. It's in these moments of profound vulnerability that opportunists often appear draped in the guise of saviors. Enter Reginald Sterling, a name whispered with reverence in the boardrooms of Silicon Valley, a self-proclaimed genius and the kind of tech magnate who owned half the hospitals in the region. Sterling wasn't just rich. He was smug about it, a man with too much money, too many toys, and as David would soon learn, not nearly enough heart. He arrived unannounced, flanked by a PR team and private security, having read about Lena in a local newspaper. He saw not a suffering child, but an opportunity. A miracle package of top international neurologists, AI-powered diagnostics, and experimental procedures, all at zero cost. David, emotionally worn and desperately clinging to any sliver of hope, asked only one question. Will it bring her back? Sterling chuckled, his eyes glinting beneath designer sunglasses. Black boy, I know how to make your daughter wake up. Trust me, we'll give her the best tech money can buy. We'll upgrade her brain like an iPhone. The laugh echoed cold and hollow off the hospital walls. David's jaw tightened. She's not a machine. He stated, his voice low and firm. She's a little girl. Sterling simply waved dismissively. Emotion makes you weak. Science wins. This, my friends, is the insidious lie that often whispers in our ears when we're at our lowest, that only power, only money, only the most advanced technology can save us. How many of us, when faced with overwhelming odds, have been tempted to place our faith in the cold logic of systems that truly don't see our humanity? It's a common mistake, born from desperation, to believe that a glittering solution from someone powerful is always the right solution, especially when genuine empathy is absent. But Lena didn't stir. Not that day, nor the next. Sterling brought in every gadget imaginable. Machines with blinking lights, virtual simulations, even a VR headset placed gently over Lena's eyes. Nothing worked. One by one, the specialists flew out quietly, shamefully, leaving behind only invoices and silent monitors. By Sunday evening, Sterling stopped coming altogether, his empty promises dissolving into the sterile air. He had seen Lena as a project, a case study, not a soul. And when his tools failed, he moved on. This is the stark reality for many who are vulnerable and seeking help within a system that values profit over people. They are often discarded when they no longer serve a purpose or fit a neat diagnostic box. Yet David remained. He was still there, his large, calloused hands dwarfing Lena's small, limp one. He read her favorite bedtime stories, played lullabies from his phone, rubbed lotion on her feet. He even told her about the moon phases she loved so much, about how Venus had been bright in the sky just last night. The nurses called it devotion. The doctors called it desperation. But David didn't care. This was his baby girl, and he wasn't leaving her side for anything. Time chipped away at hope, but his love remained an unyielding fortress. He had learned the hard way that true strength wasn't found in the towering cranes he operated or the steel beams he lifted. It was found in the quiet, unwavering presence by his daughter's bedside. He was a builder, yes, but he was also a protector, and his protection now was simply being there. Still, the hours crawled by, marked only by the monotonous hum of machines and the steady, cruel beep of the monitor. David was exhausted, his eyes red and dry. Hope, once a roaring fire, was now just a flickering ember. But sometimes when all seems lost, when the night is at its darkest, a light appears from the most unexpected of places. And just past midnight, when the world felt entirely still, a nurse tapped softly on the window of Lena's room. "Mr. Brooks," she whispered, "there's a boy here. Says he wants to help." David blinked, the sound a jarring contrast to the silence he had grown accustomed to. A boy. What boy? He stepped out cautiously, unaware that the true battle for Lena's soul was about to begin, and that the answers lay not in advanced technology or medical degrees, but in the unseen whispers of hope. The sterile quiet of the hospital corridor was broken only by the hum of machines and the frantic beat of David's own heart. He followed the nurse's pointing finger to the lobby, where a sight both incongruous and captivating awaited him. There, sitting alone on a cold bench, was a barefoot black child. He couldn't have been older than 11. He wore an oversized gray hoodie, frayed at the sleeves, his jeans torn, and his face smudged with dirt. But it wasn't his appearance that caught David's breath. It was his eyes. Deep, clear, and still holding a wisdom that defied his tender age. David approached cautiously. "Are you Lena's father?" the boy asked, standing up and nodding respectfully. David hesitated. "Yes. Who are you?" The boy didn't answer that. Instead, he simply stated, "I know how to help her." David blinked, sleep-deprived and emotionally raw. "What did you say?" "I know how to wake her up." The words weren't loud or arrogant. They were delivered with a quiet certainty that pierced through David's exhaustion. "You're just a kid, man." David sighed, the weight of a week's despair heavy on his shoulders. The boy, unfazed, nodded. But sometimes it takes someone small to remind people of big things. David appreciated the thought, but specialists, billionaires, advanced tech. Nothing had worked. He felt a familiar weariness creep in. "She's not lost," the boy said softly, his gaze unwavering. "She's listening from far away, but she doesn't know if it's safe to come back." David's mouth went dry. How could this child know? The boy stepped forward. "She needs something the hospital doesn't have." David leaned in. "What?" The boy looked him in the eyes, a gaze so profound it felt like he was looking directly into David's soul. "She needs your pain, your truth. The words you've hidden behind strength." David was stunned. Who was this boy? Every instinct screamed no to protect himself from further heartbreak, to maintain the stoic front he'd perfected over years of hard labor and quiet grief. But something deeper, something old and aching inside him, nodded in surrender. "All right," he whispered. "Can I sit with her?" The boy, whose name David would soon learn, was Samson, entered Lena's room and stood beside her. He placed one hand lightly on her head, his lips moving silently for a moment. Then he turned to David, his eyes full of an unspoken urgency. "Now you. She knows you're here, but she needs to know why you're still here." David stared at his daughter, her frail form so still beneath the pink blanket. His heart clenched. His lips parted, and then it came. The words he hadn't dared to utter aloud since the day she collapsed, words buried under layers of guilt, responsibility, and the unspoken pressure to be strong. "I wasn't there, baby," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I was at work. I missed your breakfast. I missed your smile. I missed your warning signs." Tears, hot and uncontrollable, ran down his cheeks, falling onto her blanket. He gripped her small hand, shaking. "I should have seen something was wrong. I should have been home earlier. I should have held you longer that morning. I should have told you how proud I was." The raw, unfiltered confession, a geyser of regret that had been building for days, finally erupted. He wasn't the unshakable foreman now. He was just a broken father. "Please, Lena, come back. I'll never miss another second. I promise." A profound silence filled the room, heavy with David's confession. And then the heart monitor blipped. Not in a steady routine rhythm, but a little faster. Just once. The nurse gasped. David blinked, disbelieving. "Did you see that?" he choked out. "I did," Samson said calmly, a faint smile playing on his lips. "She's listening." And just like that, he turned to leave. "Wait!" David called out a desperate plea. "What's your name?" The boy paused, his hand on the door. "They call me Samson," he said. "I'll be back tomorrow." And he walked into the hallway barefoot and silent, as if he belonged to another world entirely. David turned back to Lena. Her fingers twitched slightly, a subtle flutter. And for the first time in a week, the machines blinked with a different rhythm. Not routine, but hope. The sun had barely broken over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of soft pink and orange. But David hadn't moved from Lena's side. His back ached. His eyes were red and dry, but he refused to rest. Why? Because sometime during the long hours of the night, Lena's left index finger had twitched again. This time, it wasn't a monitor's prompt. It was like a whisper from the other side. Faint, fleeting, but undeniably real. No one else had seen it. No one else needed to. He had. As daylight poured through the hospital blinds, a new nurse on shift rolled her eyes when David spoke of the boy. "No visitor was signed in last night," she said, tapping her tablet, "and no child was on the security footage either. Are you sure you weren't dreaming?" David said nothing, just stared at the small pink blanket rising and falling over his daughter's chest. Because he knew Samson had been real. The moment that boy touched Lena's head, something shifted in the room, not just physically, but spiritually, like a window opened somewhere in the universe. Still he wondered, where did Samson go? Where did he come from? He had spoken like someone who had known Lena her whole life, like someone who had known him. Not the version of himself wearing grease-stained jeans and holding hope together with raw knuckles, but the man who used to believe that love was louder than fear. He hadn't been that man in years. He had tried to be a provider, a protector, but he realized now that he hadn't listened to Lena, not truly, in a long time. She loved stories, not flashy cartoons, but old myths, ones he used to tell her on late Sunday nights when her mother was still alive. She would curl up next to him and ask, "Tell me again about the girl who whispered to the moon." But after the accident that took his wife David buried those stories along with his grief. He worked longer hours, stopped singing, stopped dreaming. Lena noticed, but she never complained. She just grew quieter. And now she was silent. Until Samson came. That afternoon, David did something he hadn't done in years. He prayed. Not with eloquent words, not with theology, just raw, cracked honesty. "God, if you're there, if you're still listening, don't let this be it." And then, like a breath caught in the lungs of the world, the door creaked again. David turned. Samson stood in the doorway, same frayed hoodie, same bare feet, same calm eyes. "I said I'd come back," he said. David nearly ran to him. "Where do you go? Who are you?" "I go where I'm needed," the boy answered, "and I'm someone who remembers what others forget." Samson walked to the bed, gently placed a hand on Lena's wrist, and closed his eyes. "She's closer today." David's heart jumped. "Closer." "She's been listening," Samson said. Your voice reached her yesterday, but now she needs something else. Tell me, David whispered. She needs the song. David's face twisted in confusion. Song! Samson looked up. The one you used to sing to her before the fire, before the quiet. David stumbled back like he'd been punched. There was only one song, a lullaby, not recorded anywhere, not shared. Just his voice in the dark, carrying the melody of a story from his childhood, one his grandmother used to sing when he was scared. There's light in the shadows and stars in the rain. Hold on, little dreamer, you'll fly once again. He hadn't sung it since the day they buried his wife. His throat tightened. I can't. Yes, you can, Samson said softly, because she still remembers it, and so do you. The hospital room faded in David's eyes, replaced by a tiny living room with soft yellow curtains. A little girl on his lap, her head on his chest, their world warm and whole. He blinked hard, the memory shattering. But his heart remembered. So he sat beside her bed and cleared his throat. It cracked, his voice trembled, but he began, "There's light in the shadows and stars in the rain." He paused, emotion overwhelming him. Samson nodded again, and David did. "Hold on, little dreamer, you'll fly once again." A long, low beep came from the monitor. David panicked, but then saw it her heart rate was rising, not dangerously, but steadily. Then her fingers twitched once, twice. The nurse on duty gasped. "She's reacting to the music." Samson looked at David. "You gave her something to come back to. Now she knows the way." David wiped his eyes. "Why are you helping us? You don't know us." Samson stepped away from the bed. "You're wrong. I do know her." David stiffened. Samson took a breath. "Not her name, but her heart." He looked around the room. "Because I was a child once who cried in a bed like this alone, afraid. No one ever came for me. No songs, no hands holding mine. I waited and waited, but no one told me to come home." Silence choked the air. "I promised if I ever got the chance to change that I would." David fell to his knees beside him. You're like an angel." Samson didn't answer. He just turned to Lena and whispered, "You've been found." Then he stepped toward the door. David called out, "Will you come again tomorrow?" The boy turned slightly. "If she needs me, yes. But I think your voice is stronger now." "Wait." David ran to the hallway, but just like before, the boy had vanished. This time, David asked the receptionist, check the security cameras. No trace. But none of that mattered, because when he returned to the room, Lena's eyes were fluttering beneath her lids. She wasn't awake, but she wasn't gone. And for the first time in a week, David smiled. The ICU floor was unnaturally quiet. A hushed reverence settling over room 317. Doctors moved like whispers, and machines beeped in a steady, almost musical rhythm. Something holy lingered in the air, now not the sterile cold of medicine, but something soft, something warm. David hadn't barely blinked since the night before, his voice worn to a husk from singing the same song again and again. Not because someone told him to, but because he saw how every single note brought his daughter closer. The monitors didn't lie. Her brain waves had stabilized, her heart was strong. And this morning, at precisely 6:02 a.m., Lena's right hand, the one that had been limp for 7 days, reached for his. No one had coached her, no reflex test, no stimulus. She just reached. David had crumbled sobbing into her blanket. It was a movement that should have been impossible, a movement that had no scientific explanation. But David didn't care about science anymore. He only cared about faith and a boy with no shoes who had taught him to believe again. Dr. Lester stood by the window flipping through her notes for the third time that hour. "We don't understand this," she murmured, her voice equal parts amazed and skeptical. "Neurologically, nothing explains this kind of spontaneous recovery in the absence of medication or surgical intervention." The nurse beside her looked baffled. "So what do we chart it as?" Dr. Lester hesitated, then whispered, "Call it an anomaly." But David smiled from the corner, gently holding Lena's hand. "You call it what you want," he said, but I know what I saw, what I heard. Dr. Lester raised an eyebrow. You think it's the boy? David nodded slowly. I don't just think it, I know it. That afternoon, David stepped outside for the first time in 3 days. The world felt different. Everything felt different. The sun didn't feel like fire anymore. It felt like promise. He walked to the nearest convenience store, not for food, but for something very specific, a small spiral notebook. One he could fill with songs, stories, truth. Because Samson was right. Lena needed her father's voice, not the one buried under bills and burdens, but the one that told her she was loved safe and never truly alone. David wasn't going to lose her again. Back at the hospital, David found something taped to Lena's window, a note folded small, written in crooked blue pen. He opened it with shaking fingers. Sometimes the healing comes before the waking. Don't give up on her just because her eyes are closed. She hears you. Keep singing. David pressed the paper to his heart. Samson had come again, not in flesh, but in presence. The hospital had no record of anyone entering or exiting, no staff had seen him, but he had been there. Lena's breathing changed after that. It deepened, became more rhythmic, less labored, less mechanical. Her color returned in full. And then late that night, she spoke again. A whisper, a murmur, but unmistakable, Daddy. David dropped the notebook, his legs went weak. He rushed to the bed and cupped her face in his trembling hands. Lena, can you hear me, baby? She blinked slowly, her lips barely moved. You came back. I never left, he whispered, his voice breaking. A single tear rolled down her cheek. Where's the boy? She asked. David froze. You saw him? She nodded slowly. He said he was the echo that found me when I was floating and couldn't see. He sang until I heard your voice again. She closed her eyes. He held my hand. He said, your daddy's waiting on the other side of the dark. And I followed the light. David felt the weight of her words settle into his soul like a stone into water. He led you back, Lena whispered. He smelled like dust and bread. He laughed like sunlight. He said his name was Samson. Tears rolled freely now. Sweetheart, David choked. Samson is... He didn't know how to finish that sentence. An angel. A messenger. A miracle, maybe all three. But Lena smiled faintly. He said he didn't need wings to fly, just faith. The next morning, news had already spread. The hospital was in quiet uproar, whispered conversations filling the hushed hallways. Lena's chart didn't make sense anymore. There were no medications listed to explain the recovery, no clinical trial. Just a girl who shouldn't have woken up but did. Because of a voice. And a boy no one could find. Outside room 317, a young intern sat scrolling through security footage. He rewound, fast-forwarded, zoomed in, but Samson wasn't there. Not once. Not in any frame. The cameras showed David singing, crying, begging, but the hallway that Samson walked through empty every single time. The intern leaned back, goosebumps rising on his arms. That boy, he whispered, was never on camera. Meanwhile, David and Lena were holding hands watching cartoons. She had color in her cheeks, a smile on her lips. Sleep still pulled at her eyes, but life had returned in full. Tell me the story again, she said. What story? David asked. The girl who whispered to the moon. David blinked. He hadn't told that story since before the quiet. But she smiled, and he knew Samson had told her. She hadn't forgotten after all. Neither had he. That night, David didn't leave the hospital. He couldn't. Not yet. He stayed awake in a chair beside Lena's bed, notebook in hand, writing page after page stories, songs, prayers. He would never again let silence be his language. Just before midnight, he stepped into the hallway for some air. The wing was empty, lights dimmed. And then out of nowhere, a voice, soft, familiar. You did good, Mr. Brooks. He turned and there he was, barefoot, Same dusty coat, same dirt-streaked cheeks, but this time smiling wide. David stepped forward. "Samson." The boy nodded. "She doesn't need me anymore. She asked for you." "I know," Samson said, "but now she has you. That's better." David's eyes welled. "Will I ever see you again?" Samson tilted his head. "Maybe. Or maybe someone else will." "What do I owe you?" David whispered. Samson's smile softened. "Tell her stories every night, even when she's grown. Never stop singing." And then he turned, walked toward the end of the hallway, and vanished. No door opened, no sound. Just gone. But David didn't chase him. He just stood there, still full. 3 months had passed since Lena Brooks woke from the coma that stole her light. 3 months since a barefoot boy with dust on his skin and stars in his voice led her back from the edge of the darkness. David hadn't stopped telling the story since, not because it made sense, but because it mattered. He'd told it to reporters, to the hospital board, to skeptical doctors with clipboards and narrowed eyes. He told it to himself in the middle of the night when fear crept back in. But most importantly, he told it to Lena every single night, and she remembered every word. The doctors called it spontaneous neural reintegration. They said the coma was likely caused by an idiopathic cerebral shutdown. Big words, words that danced around the truth, words that didn't fit in the real story, because no study, no EEG, no medical journal entry could explain what David had witnessed, what Lena had felt. She had described Samson's laugh, his touch, the way he smelled like bread, and hope. She remembered what he said. "You're not lost, you're just not finished yet." Lena started therapy the week after she was discharged. Her steps were shaky, her hands trembled when she held a crayon, but her will was unshakable. Each time her legs gave out, she whispered one name, Samson. Each time she wanted to give up, she hummed a tune, a lullaby David had never taught her, but Samson had. And David would sit by the piano every night after therapy, playing that melody until she danced again. David sold the Range Rover first, then the lake house in Colorado, then the last of his trust fund investments. He didn't tell anyone, didn't feel the need to, because for the first time in his life, he wasn't buying anything. He was building. With time, with words, with truth. He used the money to launch a program called Echoes of Dawn, a free art and music center for children in underserved communities, especially those navigating trauma, illness, or grief. Its slogan, "Where silence ends and healing begins." The first mural that went up on the wall was painted by Lena, a child with a coat too big and shoes too small, a hand extended from the darkness offering a song. And beneath it, in big blue brushstrokes, "He didn't have wings, he had faith." Reporters asked about the boy, of course. Where is he now? Is he real? What was his name? Each time David said the same thing. His name is Samson. I don't know where he is, but I know where he was when it mattered. A few laughed, others called it folklore. But a few wiped their eyes because they believed. And sometimes, belief changes more than facts ever could. One evening, Lena and David took a walk through their old neighborhood. She wore purple rain boots even though it hadn't rained in days. "It's just in case," she said. "Samson told me the best surprises happen when you're ready for them." They stopped at a quiet street corner, the one near the closed-down train station. There, beneath the broken street lamp, stood an old man playing harmonica. A cardboard sign rested at his feet. It read, "You're not lost, you're just not finished yet." Lena gasped. "Daddy, look!" David blinked, then walked over. The man smiled through a grizzled beard. His fingers were calloused, his clothes worn. "Where'd you get that phrase?" David asked gently. The man shrugged. "Heard it from a little boy years ago. Said he traveled light, only carried truth. Used to play music with me, till one day he just vanished." "Was his name Samson?" Lena asked. The man's eyes sparkled. "Well, now that was what he said, wasn't it?" Lena turned to David, grinning wide. "He's still out there, Daddy." David felt something bloom in his chest. "Yeah, I think he is." That night, Lena couldn't sleep. She stood by her bedroom window staring at the moon. David walked in and sat beside her. "You okay, baby?" "I was thinking," she said, hugging her stuffed giraffe. "What if Samson finds another little girl who's lost, and what if she's scared like I was?" David brushed her hair back. "Then I hope someone is singing nearby." She nodded solemnly. "We should teach the world to sing." He smiled. "You want to do that?" "Yes, like you taught me, but bigger. Like everywhere on the internet, on YouTube, on rooftops in the middle of the night, when people feel the most alone." David hugged her close. "Then we'll do it." And they did. They recorded Lena's story, her drawings, her laughter. David recorded songs from the notebook he used in the hospital, raw, honest trembling with love. They called the channel Samson's Echo. In 2 weeks, it reached 2 million views. In 4 months, they received over 10,000 messages from ICU. Beds, broken homes, orphanages, prison cells, lonely dorm rooms. Each one ended the same way. "I thought I was lost, but now I think maybe I'm just not finished yet." On the 1-year anniversary of her waking, Lena stood on a small stage at the Echoes of Dawn Center. She held a microphone with both hands, her knees trembled, but her voice did not. She sang the song Samson had taught her. And as she finished, David noticed a boy sitting in the back row. Barefoot, dusty coat, a soft smile. Their eyes met, and then he was gone. No applause, no sound, just faith. Final note. Miracles aren't always thunder and lightning. Sometimes they're dirt under your nails and stories at bedtime. Sometimes they're the voice of a father rediscovering his song, or a little girl's hand reaching through the dark, or a black boy no one believes in laughing at the impossible until it isn't impossible anymore. Because the truth is, he didn't wake her up. He reminded the world. If this story resonated with you, if it made you think, made you feel, then please hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message and subscribe to our channel for more tales that challenge, inspire, and remind us of the incredible human spirit. Your support helps us amplify these crucial stories. Thank you for listening.